Welcome back to VMware View 5 Essentials Training. This lesson is all about the lab that we're going to use throughout the rest of this course. So let's start by talking about what advantages we gain by having a lab. First of all, it allows you to follow along with our demonstrations. This will help to cement these ideas in your head. Muscle memory can mean a lot in the IT industry, and by actually going through the same steps that we show you, you'll be that much further ahead. Having your own lab will allow you to do things with View that might not be possible with a production environment, assuming you even have a production environment to work with. Different items like kiosk mode and local mode are things that a lot of customers simply don't need, or don't do on their initial deployment. Having a lab in which you can set this up and play around with it will help you gain a lot of experience that won't be possible otherwise. In order to really understand how a product works, and how to best troubleshoot it, you need to break it, and you really don't want to do that with a production environment. By having a lab, you can break it in different ways, see how it behaves, and figure out what log files and database entries you need to look at in order to properly troubleshoot it. And finally, it'll help you build out various uncommon use cases that you or the community as a whole may not normally run into. Here's a quick look at the hardware that I'll be using in order to do the demonstrations. What I have built out for this course is primarily hardware-based, but a decent lab environment can easily be built on a very powerful laptop with a lot of storage. The base of my lab is a pair of ML150 G6s. These are tower servers that sit in my basement. Each one has a quad-core 2.0 GHz Intel Nehalem processor. This provides me the ability to exercise all vSphere features, like FT for example. Each one has 8 GB of RAM and 3 NICs as well, providing me plenty of room to spin up virtual machines. It doesn't provide me with a lot of room for HA and failover capability, but it's more than enough to run a View environment. For storage, I'm using an iOmega iX4 200D. In it, there's 4 1TB drives that are rated together and provide me 2 TB of usable space. The space I am presenting is both iSCSI and NFS storage to my ESXi hosts. Tying this all together is a Netgear 1 GB switch. The switch is capable of doing VLANs and port trunks, both of which are important features to play around with if you're studying for certification exams. And finally, I have a static IP address set up on my DSL router. This allows me to access my View infrastructure remotely using the View security server, but you'll learn more about that in future lessons. So prior to starting this course, I've set up a Windows 2008 R2 Active Directory with integrated DNS and DHCP, running on a single VM called DC01. I also have a Windows 2008 R2 VM running vCenter 5.0. This machine is named VC01. Each of my 2 physical servers are both running ESXi 5.0 and are named ESX01 and ESX02. I have a virtual machine running Windows XP that I can use as a client workstation called XP01, and a physical desktop that's running Windows 7 named BrianDT. Now the core of our View infrastructure is going to be built on the following VMs. ViewCon01 will be our View connection server and is running Windows 2008 R2. This is the center of the View infrastructure and will be the first piece that Lane will install for you. ViewSec01 will be our View security server, providing external access to our View infrastructure. ViewTransfer01 is provided for the local mode operations of View. We won't go in depth into this particular piece of technology for this course, but it is part of the infrastructure and will be used for more advanced courses around local mode itself. ViewXP Parent01 is the parent VM that we'll use as the basis for our desktop pools. Now a Windows 7 machine would work equally well for this purpose, but due to the extra disk and memory requirements of Windows 7, I decided to go ahead and continue using Windows XP to try and keep my lab a little bit slimmer. And ThinApp01 is a Windows XP VM that we'll use for packaging our applications using ThinApp. Here's a quick view of the inventory of VC01 on the VMs and Templates view. Finally, here's a view of my Active Directory structure I have set up. You'll see I have specific OUs created to hold my security groups, my different service accounts, user accounts, and the vDesktops that we'll be creating. The user accounts and vDesktops OUs are very important because we'll need to apply group policies to those two objects. But again, we'll get into that in later lessons. Now, if you're interested in actually building your own lab, here's a few resources that I've found useful as I was building out my lab. These are all written by community members that have their own labs at home, and use them probably more extensively than I would, including one from TrainSignal's own David Davis on his VMwareVideos.com website. So go check them out and decide first whether or not you want to take the time to build your lab, and if you do decide to, then you need to decide whether it will be a physical lab or virtual lab built on top of a high-end laptop or desktop. Hopefully this was a good overview of the infrastructure we'll be using, because you'll see a lot of these pieces over and over again. If you have any further questions about this lab setup, or how I decided on the different components, feel free to go back to Lesson 1 to find my contact information so you can get a hold of me and ask those questions. But that's it for now. We'll see you in the next lesson.